And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here at KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We're joined by the author of The Lives of the Constitution, Joseph Teratosky. Mr. Teratosky, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Well, you have a really distinguished background, James Wilson Fellow in Constitutional Law at the Claremont Institute for the Study of Statesmanship and Political Philosophy. Also, your work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, and you've got some Western roots, which is really good. You served as the Deputy Solicitor General of Nevada, a white-collar criminal litigator at the international law firm, and as a law clerk to a federal appellate judge. So was this a labor of love, this book about the lives of the Constitution?
Yes, it was. I don't think I could have done it if it hadn't been, since I was mostly doing this while working in a day job as a lawyer. But yes, very, very much so. I wanted to show Americans how much we have to be proud of our Constitution and how we have now lived under it for 230 years, which is longer than any people in the history of the earth.
It is amazing for such a young country to have such a lasting document. Before we get into the Constitution, I have to ask you, being an attorney, you're litigating, you're researching, you're doing the billable hours thing. How did you find the discipline then, and we're not talking about something light here, but to jump into the Constitution and, put in the time, effort, and mental energy? What type of discipline did you have to act on just to make that happen, sir?
It meant things like cutting out movies and TV shows. It was sort of like a second job, self-imposed time deadlines, which was a trick I learned while working as a journalist before I went to law school. So not for everyone. I don't even know if I could do it again myself, but it was fun in the end, for the most part.
Well, I'm glad it was, and I'm really pumped up to find out about Hamilton's influence in your book and in your thoughts on the Constitution. Before that, though, we've got to ask you the big news concerning the Supreme Court. Based on your research, based on your work in the law, how did the Founding Fathers come up with this idea of a Supreme Court and how it would be selected to ensure that, for lack of a better term, it would be objective or balanced or something of that nature? It wouldn't be a dictatorship?
Yeah, they had the notion of a court. I think it was controversial at the time, the idea that the court could invalidate laws, but we've eventually got there. One of the trends I explore in the book is how our conceptions of our constitutional arrangements have changed over time. And one of the most clear and important trends is the way in which the Supreme Court has drawn to itself, sometimes imperceptibly, ever greater amounts of power. The court, over time, has come to decide social, cultural questions of prisons, welfare, speech, religion. And I've arrived at the point where the composition of the court is an important national issue. It's almost a national crisis, deciding who sits on the court, because they are perceived by so many Americans as sort of annually remodeling the Constitution in their image.
Well, that is, and you're right, it was controversial at the time. When you take a look at the Supreme Court now in the news, it's either for a change, a retirement, or for a big controversial ruling. Your thoughts on Justice Kennedy leaving and his legacy?
Yeah, I think Justice Kennedy exemplifies where we've arrived. I mean, it is the fraught nature of the retirement of a single person who serves for decades on a court shows how far we've come. It seems to me there's a real question asked whether that could have been part of the original conception, that so much power would reside with so few people. He's given long service, but it's particularly fraught in his case because he has been the most famous swing vote of modern times.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Let's talk a little bit about who you think is going to replace him. Any idea?
Yeah, the president has his short list. There's a number of talented people. Some sort of stars of the appeals courts like Brett Kavanaugh. Some newer names like Amy Barrett or Ramul Sapar. He seems to have the president seems to have winnowed it down pretty narrowly at this point, having already had one run through. So I'd expect them to name someone in the coming days. I bet I'm sure it's going to be someone on his short list. And the word is some of the names I've thrown out seem to be the leading contenders.
Let's talk a little bit about the Constitution then. Everybody gives Thomas Jefferson a bunch of credit, but you seem to be like me, a Hamilton guy.
Oh, you're a Hamilton? Great. Well, one of the things I found is that since the beginning, you can reliably divide all of our constitutional interpretation into Hamilton wings and the Jefferson. Hamilton was the believer in a broad, flexible, energetic constitution. Jefferson saw it as a means to restrict power. And those two tendencies have fought for these last 230 years. I think we've arrived at a Hamiltonian constitution. That's what the constitution we have today. And it's just one simple measure of that. You take a State of the Union speech, the president, whether it's Barack Obama or President Trump, will get up and talk about our vast international trade, our far-flung military, how carefully he's monitoring our economy. These were all Hamilton's preoccupations. This is what Hamilton wanted, and these were things that gave Jefferson nightmares. I mean, the idea of a standing army or federal control over the economy. So it's interesting to recognize how this country has changed. Even though we continue to quote Jefferson, we tend to follow Hamilton.
Right.
Hamilton deserves a little more credit.
He doesn't seem to get any. In fact, if it hadn't been for the Broadway show, they would have kicked him off the currency. And I'm thinking to myself, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to really understand the brilliance of Alexander Hamilton. And look, he was no fan of Jefferson, but what he did to allow Jefferson to be president over Burr, which eventually would cost him his life. Okay, morally, he's not going to, be a priest, but what a huge impact Hamilton had on us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that, and very few people recognize that, especially the way you just put it so concisely. Jefferson was his mortal enemy. I mean, it just shows Hamilton. I find that Hamilton was among the most committed to principle types that we've ever had. Jefferson was his mortal enemy, and yet he ensured Jefferson's victory because he was just worried that Burr was sort of an incipient dictator, and he lost his life for it. I mean, the duel with Burr was political fallout from from the way Hamilton derailed Burr's political career. And it's worth remembering, especially when we talk about how tense politics are today, that the sitting vice president of the nation, Aaron Burr, murdered the most prominent cabinet official from the Washington administration. And Burr kept his job.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about Daniel Webster and the Civil War.
Daniel Webster, I thought, was an interesting, important person to put in the book because he was the most important constitutional lawyer, maybe of all time, and certainly in his generation, which was the first generation to follow framers. Webster's father had served in the war, Revolutionary War, had guarded Washington's tent after Benedict Arnold's betrayal. And this generation was scared to death that they would be the very first to follow the framers, would fumble away framers' handiwork. And they fought over a number of important issues that were resolved only by the Civil War, about whether the Supreme Court would be the final arbiter of constitutional questions, whether a state could block a federal law within its jurisdiction, the president's veto power, many, many questions on which Webster's arguments have mostly carried the day.
Well, they love him in New Hampshire.
Yeah, as they should. He grew up there and then later served as Massachusetts'
Finally, what about Scalia and his warning about the power of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, it gave Scalia the last word. I think today's a good day to discuss that. He spent a quarter century of his life warning Americans about what he saw as the way that the court was slowly usurping what had been democratic prerogatives. And questions that had been formerly left to Democratic majorities were now being constitutionalized. The court was saying the Constitution speaks to this finally, and to say the Constitution speaks to something is to say that the justices do. And he worried that decision by decision, this was undermining self-government.
Wow. We see that today. If you had to handicap a pick for the Supreme Court, anybody you think that will be there? For me, I'm a Bill Pryor guy, but that's because I've known him for years. Your thoughts?
You know, I like Bill Pryor too. He's a great judge. He has great personality, and I actually think that it would be particularly nice to have a judge who has served in a state capacity for a long time, whether on a state Supreme Court or the way Bill Pryor did as a state attorney general, because federalism is a big issue, and I think you best understand federalism, of course, being the balance of power between the state and federal government. And only if you've served in a state, you have a particularly good vantage about the way in which federal power has grown and the way in which states are pushed aside in many cases unfairly. So I think that having that perspective would be particularly nice, as opposed to someone who spent their entire career in federal service. So actually, I like Bill Pryor too. He was on the short list with Tom Hardiman and Neil Gorsuch. And obviously, Gorsuch got the nod, but I would like to see Bill Pryor seriously considered as well.
The lives of the Constitution. Mr. Chertovsky, we appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Have a great day, and keep up the fight for Hamilton, our guy.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Thank you so much. Glad to meet a brother Hamilton admirer.
Okay, sir. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Phone number is 580. Ray, it's a good thing we didn't schedule him at the 6th. We probably would have put us all asleep. But what a passionate young man, and his pick for the attorney, for the Supreme Court, former Attorney General Bill Pryor. Phone number's here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO, and we're doing a few things here. We want to bring the president to Idaho. That's number one. Number two, what about Congressman Labrador for the Supreme Court? Now, people speculated that the congressman would get a judgeship. Why not just make him a judge on the Supreme Court? Phone number's here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Big news of the day. Is this the beginning of a new conservative Supreme Court? And why that's a great thing. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And coming up, the only show that takes you to the White House from your house. We'll go to the White House to talk to John Decker. That's coming up. Get his thoughts about the big announcement concerning Justice Kennedy stepping down. And by the way, I love access to John Decker and all the folks from Fox. John Decker, as you may or may not know, used to work for a senator called Senator Hines. Yes. John Hines of Pennsylvania, one of the heirs of the Hines legacy, right? His wife remarried John Kerry, Teresa Hines Kerry, but John worked for him. Then he's worked as a reporter. He's an attorney. So that insight from John Decker is about less than 10 minutes away. And we're looking forward to hearing not only his take as a reporter, but his thoughts as an attorney and someone who teaches, in Washington, teaches college courses in Washington as well. So I guess you'd say a professor as well. Phone number's here, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. How about Congressman Labrador for Supreme Court? Wouldn't that be cool? Boy, you talk about representing the West. First you have Gorsuch, and then you have Congressman Labrador. Now, next week, and Ray Amaya, you and I have been talking about this for quite some time. Next week is the second or first slowest week of the year for news, for everything else. Well, unless you cover the NBA or unless you cover the White House, there's never a dull moment. Now, why are we talking about the slowest times of the year? Well, it's the 4th of July. And many people will take off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Heck, in some places, If you're a good boy, they give you the day off before or after. And if they do that, heck, you might as well just take Friday and come back Monday and punt. But when we're talking about the 4th of July, there's a new study coming out about the safest and most dangerous states on the 4th of July. And believe it or not, Idaho is number 2 in that. That's right. Idaho's number 2 when we're talking about fireworks safety, fireworks prevention, wildfires, drinking while intoxicated, or driving while intoxicated. Believe it or not, that comment got me fired from Nashville. Still have trouble with that. Driving while intoxicated. Look, if they're going to get you, they're going to get you. Long story. Impaired drivers. So you've got the western states not doing very well. Oklahoma, Idaho, Kansas, Washington, California in the top 5. But here's the thing. If you have limited government, which we do and we pride ourselves on, then you're not going to have the big machine to police the populace. And maybe that's the next infrastructure project, is to hire more people for ISP, to hire more people locally when it comes to law enforcement. I don't buy the fact, and if it is true, then we have a bigger problem than we should, that we can't get enough good qualified people to go into law enforcement. But I do want to get your thoughts on this at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. First, traffic and weather together. The time is 8:26. Let's get you to work safely and on time.
Gabbard.
Back to this column here. Unfortunately, the combination of long weekend road trips, driving to and from parties, and fully stocked coolers means there will be more impaired drivers on the road. That's a big issue when we're talking safety. Do you handle that and if you don't have enough police officers on the road, what do you do? Maybe you don't go out. Maybe you stay home. You got Zamzo's talking about these Thunder vests. I think I might go check one of those out, because you have dogs that are very fearful. You have the warning every year. We hear it from, the different folks they bring in. They come in for 2 or 3 years, then they move on, the news people, about, hey, the Humane Society says put your pets away, don't leave them outside. And then you have all these lost pets. I agree. I totally get it. But when we're talking about dangers, of course, it comes to, again, self-correction. And I'm still trying to figure out, we talked about this yesterday, if fireworks are legal to buy. And, again, limited government state. But here's the other thing. With all due respect, if fireworks are illegal to buy, if fireworks are illegal to use, then why are they allowed to sell them? Well, the state wants the revenue from the fireworks guys. They're entrepreneurs. I mean, they build these elaborate facilities, and they're there for a week, 2 weeks. So the profit margin's got to be there. With all due respect to the people selling fireworks, I get it. But if the state were really serious about shutting down the fireworks, if fireworks were really illegal, which the state says they are, then why are they selling them? Well, you have to promise to go to Oregon, or go to Nevada, or go to the desert. Yeah, sure. Pro-Life joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio as we talk a little bit about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Good morning, sir. You're on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio.
Yeah, it's the best station in Idaho for sure.
Well,
anyway,
thank you.
The Supreme Court has really been misused, and it is gaining more and more credence and power, which is not originally intended by the founders. The founders intended that the Supreme Court would rule something unconstitutional, then that would mean that Congress would have to revisit it, not that became the standing law. Courts do not make law. Only Congress and legislatures make law. And until the American people realize that, we will have a judicial oligarchy eventually, a total judicial saying everything about, what's going to happen. And when you hardly ever hear the federal courts say, this is a state issue, do not bring it into the federal courts. At the present culture, we're going to take anything into a federal court, and that is not right. All criminal law is in the jurisdiction of states. And so Roe v. Wade does not need to be overturned. That just needs to have some states stand up and say, we're not going to have baby murder in this state, and we don't care what the federal government says. That's what needs to happen. Or if the President of the United States says,
Well, it sounds like you're
Navy.
advocating treason.
No, I'm not advocating treason.
You got to obey the rules. You just heard that guy a minute ago talk about federalism.
Yeah, federalism means that states have rights, and they have jurisdiction. And do you ever hear talk about jurisdiction? No, it's only about the Supreme Court makes the final decision. We are really messed up about this. I know my stuff about this kind of thing. And if we continue on this path, we will destroy our constitutional government.
Well, you're you're a downer today, man.
No, I'm not a downer.
You're a downer. We're going to bring back conservatism. We're going to get rid of the liberals on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we should. We should get rid of them.
So it's a happy day.
But Congress could get rid of them by impeaching them when they exceeded their jurisdiction. And we never hear that. Have you ever heard a congressman say, I believe that this group of judges should be dismissed because they should never have taken that case. They should know that that's a state jurisdiction. You never hear that. So, hey, I know I'm different than most people, but I know I'm right.
Well, Pro-Life will gladly accept your comments in the suggestion box, and we're on our way to Fox News.
And anybody can stop baby murder, even the sheriff. So how about that?
Well, Pro-Life, this is the second goodbye. Thank you, Pro-Life. We're on our way to Fox News. You have a great day, all right? Keep up the fight, brother. You're listening to Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie. And to the White House, John Decker joins us from Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio. John, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Just anxious to hear your take on the incredible events yesterday. Not only the president once again on the road, but getting a chance to pick another Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable so early in his presidency, with the president getting an opportunity to name two people to the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, Neil Gorsuch already on the court, confirmed last year. Even three Democrats joined Republicans in confirming Neil Gorsuch for the high court. The president has a list of 25 individuals that he's going to go through to consider. It's the same list from which he chose Neil Gorsuch. And every one of those names has solid conservative credentials. Any one of those names, I think, can win confirmation in the U.S. Senate.
And the timing seems to be right, because you've got a few senators where the president carried their states up for re-election, Democrats.
Well, the three Democrats are individuals from red states. They're individuals from states that have midterm elections. And so we're talking about Heidi Heitkamp, who voted to confirm Neil Gorsuch. In addition to that, we have Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He also voted to confirm Neil Gorsuch. And Joe Donnelly from Indiana. They will all be targeted by this president in many ways and at many times to support the nominee that he ultimately puts forward.
What's it like from your vantage point when these folks, and you've covered so many administrations and your time in the Senate, what's it like to be there covering the executive and then working in the Senate when these folks go up, the entire process? What's that like to witness?
Well, it's fascinating. I was there, of course, during the confirmation hearings for Neil Gorsuch. I had a great seat for his confirmation, and I've been in there for many of the justices that are on the Supreme Court right now for their confirmation hearings. It's a fascinating process. It's more fascinating when the process is more contentious. That happened at times with Neil Gorsuch. After all, he was confirmed 54-45. And I think that whoever the president puts forward, we're looking at an even narrower type of confirmation for that individual. And there's some good choices on that list, including Thomas Hardiman, who made the final cut. He wasn't chosen, but he certainly was among the finalists for that vacancy that developed on the Supreme Court when Antonin Scalia had his untimely death.
Well, and you wonder if the president will play it safe, or maybe he'll go with a guy, a friend of mine, Bill Pryor from Alabama, who again was on the short list, or will he? I don't think the centrist is the word, but depending, there's one thing we know is you really can't predict what the president's going to do.
You can't, so everybody that you see on television and hear on the radio saying this is the person, I know who it is. They're just guessing. They obviously the only person who knows who the president is thinking about is the president. Now there'll be a number of individuals, probably 3-4 individuals, who will come to the White House to meet with the president as the president narrows his choices. I certainly would think that some of those well-qualified women, and there are 6 well-qualified women on the list, will make it to the final cut, and we'll have to wait and see. It's an opportunity for the president to put his mark on the Supreme Court for the next few decades, because everybody on that list is relatively young and can serve on the Supreme Court for, the next 30, 40 years.
John Decker, as an attorney, the significance of the Supreme Court, we've often talked about, elections matter, presidents come and go, but the Supreme Court's influence, you could argue its influence lasts for all time or near to it.
Well, that's right. Precedents last for decades. Some precedents are on the books, and they've lasted for, well over 100 years. And so, yes, there's a huge influence that the Supreme Court has. That's why it was played such an important part in the 2016 presidential election. I think it's in good reason why President Trump won the 2016 presidential election, because of the fact that the Supreme Court would likely have some vacancies in the next 4 years, and who knows, the president may have an opportunity to name another individual to the U.S. Supreme Court before his term is done, and if he serves 2 terms, before his terms are done. So this is important, and it's the reason why both liberal and conservative groups are mobilizing for this confirmation process.
And you thought the summer would be dull.
I never think summer is dull. Not with President Trump in office. The summer is not dull. It might be the case with previous administrations, but this one, they certainly like to have the focus on them. And that's certainly the case. Every day this week, there's news coming out of this White House or impacting this White House, and today is no exception.
John, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Our great friend John Decker joining us. Let's go to Joe in Meridian to talk about the Supreme Court with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Joe.
Hi, Kevin. How are you this morning?
It's a great day in America.
It is. God keeps blessing us every day. I just feel like we have a lot of really neat things to be thankful for. I think it was said before the election that one of the major impacts that the president was going to have was to be able to nominate people to the Supreme Court and get them confirmed. And I think that is definitely panning out to be true. I think we had a couple of really great decisions. I think this decision on whether folks who are a part of a company that uses labor unions have to pay dues, that is a huge decision. I think that's going to start to pull back the lockjaw kind of negotiating and hard-fistedness that these labor unions have to basically keep us uncompetitive on the world stage. We look back at the crash of the economy and the auto industry, and it was largely because of labor unions negotiations and not being willing to negotiate fair wages for some of these folks. So I think that's going to be very interesting. I like where the Supreme Court's going in regards to states' rights a little bit, and I really like the fact that we have another chance to put another person on the Supreme Court. I was going to throw this idea out at you, Kevin. I mean, it seems to me that with the smoke screen that Trump in himself can kind of create, and the ambiguity or uncertainty of what he's going to do, and this Russia collusion thing, it's creating this kind of smoke screen over the administration where all of his folks behind the scenes are doing great work, and then they come out with things, or things happen, and it takes some of the liberal Democrats by surprise. And I think it's an interesting phenomenon. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I really don't think a lot of people saw some of these decisions coming through out of the Supreme Court. At least it wasn't advertised. And I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that just doesn't get in the news. And I think some of that's actually good for conservative values. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would love to see this Russian investigation go away, and I'd love to see the press actually be objective, but those are dreams and wishes, and that's not going to happen. What gets me, Joe, is just the complete transparent lack of objectivity and how they take everything he does personally, which shows you how well they were invested in Obama, because Trump is basically speaking the language of the people. And they're so out of touch, they don't get it. And, Lindsey Graham saying, is there anybody besides Fox News covering how the FBI tried to derail Trump from getting elected?
Exactly. I mean, it's a total coup. If you want to look at a coup in a country, and you look all over the country, and you can see coups, this has the smell and the taste and the feel of a coup. And unless you want to call a spade, we're never going to be able to hold people accountable. And I think that, Sessions and some of these other guys need to call it what it is. It was a total rebuke on a Democratic republic, and the people's ability to elect who they want in office. And that's the fact of it, Kevin. I don't think you can sugarcoat that.
Well, unfortunately, unless people cover it, it doesn't get the attention. It doesn't build the consensus. And that's what they're doing. I mean, they slow roll everything. They attack the president, and they don't even do it objectively. But that's their right. I remember, Joe, during the campaign, I'd ask these guys, how are you going to get past the liberal narrative? Well, Trump destroys it, and they can't come up with an answer for him.
But I guess what I'm saying is I think in the sense that they think they have complete control over the media and people's minds, right, in general, because they think the media is going to condition those minds. And it does some, but not all. But I think that kind of belief structure, it's a little bit arrogant. And and in some ways, they miss some of the other things that are happening behind the scenes. And then when they come out, I think it kind of takes them by surprise because they've been focusing so much on winning on these areas they're not going to win on, but they think they can, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just an interesting. It's almost like you wish things were different, but because things are the way they are, some of what we want to have happening anyways. And some of it, I think, is there's just not. You can't focus on everything, right? So Trump's just taking a strategy of saying, okay, you're going to focus on Russia and all these other things. I'm going to have my people work on the things that matter behind the scenes. I'm not going to play your game, right? Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool.
Well, Joe, great point. Thank you.
Yep, have a good one.
You too. That's a great point. Let them worry about Russian meddling. Now, this is funny. Nicole Wallace, who worked for President Bush, and if you notice all the Bush people, they hate President Trump. They're in the media now, with maybe the exception of Dana Perino. And she's got Steve Schmidt on. Now, Steve Schmidt ran campaigns. Steve Schmidt was a good boy. Steve Schmidt did this. Steve Schmidt did that. He ran John McCain's campaign. That's what he's known for. He's a loser. He ran John McCain's presidential losing campaign. Well, he's one of these Republicans that doesn't like President Trump. Here, he and Nicole Wallace are urging Democrats to delay the nominating process of the newest Supreme Court justice. And they're Republicans.
Well, Nicole, I think this is a very unfortunate hour. Restraint is an important quality in a democracy, particularly in a country where the politics are closely divided. And the reality is that Donald Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million. He won.
Now, remember, this is a Republican. The libs never turn on each other. He won the electoral votes. Who knows how many illegals voted? Who knows how much voter fraud went on? He won. So the first thing they do is to try and disqualify him, to give people, the libs, the talking points. So he's not really the president. Never mind that Hillary Clinton had more money, had more influence, had the press behind her, and still fumbled the ball, still lost the election. Oh, it's the Russians. No, it's not the Russians. And here's the deal with Donald Trump. He's actually doing things that unfortunately President Bush didn't do.
78,000 votes across 3 states. And the Republicans control all 3 branches of government, the legislative, and by Republican nominees, 5-4 on the Supreme Court. So we have a minority that is ruling the majority of the country who are opposed to this president. And that is extremely unhealthy in a democracy. As you know, in the White House, I ran the Roberts and Alito confirmation.
By the way, this guy is a Republican.
I was supportive of President Obama.
Yeah, Steve, we'll just leave it there. This guy's a Republican, and he's talking about the minority of the part the minority party running the majority of the country. Oh, really? Well, how about this one? I go back to what Donald Trump said. If Justice Kennedy had a problem with John Trump, he wouldn't have retired. But I agree with the president. Justice Kennedy knew it was time. It was time to go. And he had faith that Donald Trump would pick the right person. I do, and I know you do. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Why not Congressman Labrador? That would be great. We could have Congressman Labrador on the Supreme Court, Justice Labrador, and we could bring the president to Idaho. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Do you support marriage equality?
It's irrelevant because it was already settled. It's law. It was settled in the Supreme Court. I mean, it's done.
So even if you appoint a judge that...
It's done. You have... these cases have gone to the Supreme Court. They've been settled. And I think I'm fine with that.
All right. That was on marriage equality. Obviously, it wasn't on Roe. On Roe, he basically... What did he say?
Well, we have him here. You know what? I need my reading glasses.
Go ahead. Play the sound.
Now we have that.
Play the sound.
Will you are you looking to appoint a justice who wants to overturn Roe v. Wade?
So look, here's what's going to happen. I'm pro-life. The judges will be pro-life.
There we have it from CNN. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. But the left is going crazy, going wild on the Supreme Court decision. For me personally, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, this is a great day in America. We're back. And for the last 8 years of indoctrination under former President Obama, it's over. How do you change laws? Very simply, you take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will determine what happens. And it was never supposed to be. Remember, Trump was supposed to be the guy that the Democrats wanted to take on because he was the most beatable, right? Trump's a joke. Trump doesn't get along with people. Let's take on Trump. And somewhere, as we've talked about earlier, and we've been on the other end of this for quite some time, Kagan, Sotomayor. Remember, a wise Latina is smarter than an old white guy, or a young white guy, or white guys in general. Gee, that comment wasn't racist. And she's a justice on the Supreme Court. So today, somewhere in Washington, D.C., somewhere in Connecticut or Delaware, somewhere in Chappaqua, New York, you've got a selected group of individuals. Obama in D.C., probably being berated by Michelle, saying you should have ran Joe Biden. Smoking Joe Biden, probably contemplating a run, old Smoking Joe in 2020, hitting the heavy bag, mad that he didn't run. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton in Chappaqua. Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida thinking, how did this happen? And folks, I'll tell you how it happened. It was divine intervention. It was divine intervention. How else can you explain it? I believe that in my heart. We have gone so much to the left. Our children have been indoctrinated. You needed a jolt. How else could you explain in a Republican field of 17, this guy comes in, some could say the most flawed, the most transparent, the most authentic. He beats all these professional politicians. And with about 5 people that believed in him, takes on the Clinton machine that had the Democratic primary process rigged so she would beat a hand-picked chump, Bernie Sanders, and Bernie almost beat her, despite being outspent. And despite this first time, you've got this strong progressive millennial vibe that the 70-year-old socialist picked up on. So she goes into the general, more press coverage, more money, mo. Looks like in October it's over. You have Chris Wallace on Fox News saying to Robbie Mook, hey, have you started measuring for the curtains? And then Trump wins. And then we get Gorsuch in. And Kennedy says, hey, Trump's a great guy. I'm going to retire. Elections matter. Elections matter. Don't forget, Glenn Beck is next, followed by Dave Ramsey. Sean Hannity will bring it home with more Supreme Court coverage. Lars Larson as well. Thank you all for listening. Rehemiah, outstanding job running the mothership here. And to everybody, we appreciate you listening. We know you have choices, so thank you. And may God bless and keep the faith.